Askreddit by Reddit and chill. Serious, forensic investigators of Reddit. What are some of the most disturbing and horrific cases you've worked on? EMT. Not my call but my co-workers. Get dispatched for vaginal bleeding. Arrive at the home to find a woman sitting in a pool of blood on her bedroom floor. Transport her to the hospital where the doc examines her. He asks where the baby is. What? He states this woman just had a baby. So they go back to the home with police and search the place. My co-worker looks under the bed and sees a bowling ball bag. Opens the bag and finds the strangled dead baby. Holy shit. That took a turn for the worst. I'm an expert in work-related incidents. And am hired to investigate accidents and incidents for large corporations. 2 children fell down an elevator shaft on a building project. Employee of manufacturer in the pharmaceutical industry got his arm ripped off by a powder centrifuge. Retired person was fatally hit by the coupling of a compressed air hose after the hose broke. Worked a case involving 2 young sisters, 8 and 4. It was actually 13 and 6, if I recall. This was 20 years ago. And their meth head mom and her boyfriend. Mom was convinced her girls were possessed by demons. So she forced them to take baths in bleach. When that didn't work, she started making them drink bleach. The older girl knew enough to immediately throw up the bleach. And she would drag her sister behind the couches or wherever they could in the house to throw it up. Eventually the little daughter couldn't throw it up anymore and died. She then froze the little sister. And proceeded to hack the frozen body into pieces in front of the older sister. And then disposed of the pieces somehow. We were sent in to see if we could find the body. Walking into that house. The smell of bleach was overwhelming. And I can still remember all the bleach stains on the carpet. Edit. For those asking about the sentence. Here is a link to the story. Changed age of girls from 8 and 4 to 13 and 6. What happened to the 8-year-old? 15-year-old decided to commit suicide on the freeway. It's still not 100% clear if he jumped off the overpass first. But he was reported to be seen on the ground on the freeway by the first person who called it in, who was also the 3rd car to hit him in a matter of minutes. I didn't even have to cut to do the autopsy. We were able to get what we needed through the gaps in his broken spine. This girl from my hometown did something similar a couple years ago. She found out she was 2nd in the class instead of 1st. So she parked on the side of the highway, covered her eyes, and walked in front of a semi. She lived for a few days afterwards. When she finally died, the semi driver also committed suicide. I do fire investigation, and one that stuck with me was a likely mentally disturbed girl started speaking to God at the dinner table and then that night lit her room on fire with her in it. I think about that one a lot. This one is way crazier than the comments above to me. Not trying to sound like a psychopath, but I understand murder a little bit better than self-immolation. Not caring if you burn is such a minduck. You're either next level crazy or a hardcore monk. Back in my forensic anthropology student days, we worked on an unknown, unclaimed skeleton for class. We'd analyze these skeletons for class as part of our weekly projects. The story goes this: Jane Doe was new in town but made some fast acquaintances at a local bar. Jane Doe and her 3 new friends get the bright idea to go rob the local motorcycle gang. The gang has a house in town. But they're not there right now. Just a couple of their old ladies. So these 4 brain surgeons come up with a plan. Jane Doe and another woman will go up to the door in a panic. They'll bang on the door and scream for help. The 2 guys would wait in the bushes and spring out once the door is opened. Then they could rob the house. So with plan in hand, they get to the house. Jane Doe and the lady run up and start banging on the door, screaming bloody murder about someone bring after them. Inside are 2 of the gang's girlfriends' wives. They figure something is up. One gets a shotgun. One gets on the phone and dials 911. The women outside are banging so hard on the door it begins to break and come apart. Lady with the shotgun is scared and has it pointed at the door. The door breaks open and Jane Doe is the first through the door. Shotgun lady lets both barrels rip and deletes Jane Doe's face from eyebrows to chin. This was back in the 90s. I wonder if they ever figured out who she was. If this was in Tennessee then no. Shotgun Jane Doe is still unidentified. Gotta be the guy that stabbed his newborn and 4-year-old before slitting his throat and jabbing the knife into his chest. The worst part was his phone on the bed with numerous texts from his fiancée and mom begging him to not harm the children. Why? Why in these cases is it not sufficient to just kill yourself? Why do these people feel the compulsion to take innocence with them? Disgusting. A man decapitated his infant son with a samurai sword while high on PCP. That's up there for me. I worked in a funeral home. I seen some messed up shit. That I would quit. No ducking way I could ever see that. No way. Can't go into too much detail. But child porn. Several hundred GB of it. Some of it recorded by the owner of that particular machine. Some of it starring their own children. Made me really appreciate the boring stuff like recovering deleted invoices. Oh geez. My friend has a similar story. Except the person was running a server of it. In CT. Back a few years there was a guy high on PCP that thought his 5-month-old was possessed by the devil and then crucified them to the wall with screwdrivers. If there's one thing that I've learned from this thread, it's that I need to stay the duck away from PCP. Had a paranoid schizophrenic male who forced his elderly mother to eat rocks. And I mean a shitload of rocks. To the point where she died. He told police that he was feeding her rocks to weigh her down so God couldn't take her yet. Jesus. Reminds me of a case in the funeral home I worked in. An adult son died from an overdose in his room. Caused his mother to snap. One of her children came over unaware of what happened. Noticed a smell in the house. The mother explained that he was going to wake up like Jesus did. The daughter called 911 and fled the house. She barricaded herself in the house for 5 more days with the body. I did a case once where the home had burnt down. As was always the case, the homeowner was asked to provide a list of everything in the home. Tip: make this list before your house burns down. Most people, not this guy, can't remember, and this is how insurers shortchange you. But I digress. So homeowner emails me a list. All 190 pages of size 12 Arial print single spaces. The first 48 pages were all the books in the house. Every single book, and I mean all of them. Over 3,200 in total were biographies, memoirs and other books related to serial killers. And then, as if to prove the old saying it is the ones you least suspect, he was a normal dude. Middle-aged etc. wife. 2 kids and so on. Police arrested him 2 months later when the house was demolished and 6 bodies were found in the crawl space under the house. I don't know why. Possibly because I enjoy true crime yet do not commit crimes, but I wasn't expecting that ending. Had a father of 2 children chop up his wife in the house whilst the kids were upstairs before sending a text to the mother's parents saying, "I killed your daughter. Call the police," before going to the garage and hanging himself. That's ducking horrifying for the woman's parents. Thank goodness he didn't physically hurt the kids. A mildly overweight man had a heart attack and died on his waterbed. It broke and the sun heated the water. This is Arizona by the way, and cooked him like a ducking stew. Can't imagine that room is in any way salvageable. How do you even begin to clean that? Gotta throw the whole house away. Children's Protective Services worker here. We do forensic interviewing during our investigation, so I'm counting myself in. I watched the autopsy of a 2-month-old infant with suspected cause of asphyxiation from regurgitating too much milk from being overfed, but turned into a homicide as they peeled back the infant's scalp to reveal a massive skull fracture and brain bleed from sharp blunt force trauma to a 2-month-old. Client committed suicide by connecting zip ties around neck and pulling. Frantic scratch marks indicated they regretted the action but could not cut the zip ties due to Sharp's restriction. Sharp's restriction enforced due to recent morbid self-mutilation. Claw marks on neck and lack of oxygen to the brain was the saddest I've ever seen. The inability to say the individual died on their own terms is often the only bright side to any type of suicide I deal with. That regret. I've seen it with people who try to OD on Tylenol or Advil. Once you get to a certain point, you can't reverse the process. You die painfully. And you know you're dying. As a forensics student, I helped piece together the ripped up diaries of a girlfriend who was supposedly killed by her boyfriend and shoved into a freezer. There was another woman in there too. One of the big freezers with the lift up lid. The police found evidence that the freezer had been off a couple times as the boyfriend ran out of electric too. I had one case where a mentally ill guy killed his ex-wife and was driving around school to school in the city looking for his kids to kill then kill himself. He didn't know which schools his kids attended and there are many in the city. My girlfriend is a city school teacher. When I learned this was happening I called her and told her to lock everything. I've never been so scared in my life. That's horrific. Did he get stopped before he found the kids? Last week, I had 9 homicides, 4 multiple gunshot wounds, most being 15 shots, 4 suicides, 7 overdoses, 2 decomp cases, 1 covered in black mold, an abused infant, and an accidental shooting of a child. We've had over 200 cases in the coroner's office in 2020 already. Well over 40 homicides. They're always bad. Edit. For those asking. I work in the Midwest. But not Chicago. In the county coroner office. Where is this? I would like to avoid it at all costs. The fact that you're still able to get up and go to work every day is miraculous and I'm sorry you've seen all of that. We had an elderly couple that was a murder-suicide. More a mutual suicide. That were found frozen under a foot of nearly perfectly clear ice. Also a family that all except the mother drowned in a kayaking accident. I'm still fresh in the field and don't have any super horrific stories. But I interned with a police department while working towards my masters. I went to a scene with a deceased adult male. Suspected overdose and very recent. He was dead for around 8 hours. Nothing gruesome. But his parents found him. They were crying in the next room as an officer spoke with them. At some point we went into the deceased's bedroom, which he shared with his toddler. And I distinctly remember seeing all the toys on the floor and how they were the same ones my little cousins had. I started getting a bit emotional. But then we found bags of powder hidden in the child's clothing drawer. At the university, I took a medicological investigation course that was taught by a medical examiner. Lots of case photos. But the one I remember was of a suicide bomber. The explosives he had wrapped around himself exploded downwards. Everything below the waist was either gone or a tangled mess. But his top half looked completely untouched. I also did a mock reconstruction report for the 1970 MacDonald murders. I had access to scene and autopsy photos, including those of the children. These were almost 50-year-old pictures so the quality was not the greatest. But I don't think I'll forget them for a long time. I've seen the crime scene photos of the MacDonald murders. Messed me up for a long time. Considering I've got 2 daughters myself. Terrible and heartbreaking. I was completing my masters in forensics, anthropology, and put it on hold as I got offered a job in child protection. I've seen some ducked up shit in terms of child deaths, rape cases and severe neglect. The cases that make me sad though is when kids have been so traumatized from being sexually abused that they do it to other children. Or animals. I held my cats and didn't allow them outside for so long after working with those cases. It's disgusting to think this sort of behavior was imprinted on them from such a young age to the point where it becomes natural behavior. Used to work in the field. Craziest was a chap who tied a steel cable to a tree, then through his car window, secured it around his neck, then floored the car. Cable ran out of slack and, well, pop. Always amazed me how clean it came right off. Decapitations are normally pretty messy but this guy's creativity led to a fairly clean, instant, and memorable death for those who worked his case. Oh, and also toxic megacolon. Google image search that. Just not during dinner. Just imagine dying of a 20-kilogram turd stuck in your guts. Was like delivering the world's worst baby when we pulled it out during the PM. The latter one is how Elvis most likely died. Impaction from opioids. Long story short. Arson case. 2 kids die. Lady who started the fire also lived in the house but got kicked out by the owners for whatever reason. She had a previous felony arson charge. They found her a few days later living with her boyfriend in a tent with multiple gas cans. She was arrested and released with charges completely dropped. That's when I realized 1. How ducked our judicial system truly is, and 2. I didn't want to investigate homicides anymore. Why would they drop the charges? Ducking. Like and subscribe.